God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, guys, welcome back. Today we're going to dive back into Alcoholics Anonymous in the big book. And we're looking at chapter 5, how it works. And, it dives into the 12 steps and 1 through 4 and starts to break it down for us how this program works. And, this chapter was written by Bill W. And, he explains how it came about. He was writing and was having a little bit of writer's block, and he stopped and he prayed and he meditated and he waited a little bit. And then he went back to writing, and he said that, as soon as the pen touched the paper, it like had a mind of its own, and basically the chapter wrote itself. And he believes that this chapter was divinely inspired. And I'd have to agree, through reading it and studying it, like it's very divinely inspired. This whole program is, right? So let's get into it, how it works. And, if you've been to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, we read, this first few paragraphs at the beginning of every meeting. So it'll be familiar to you. Chapter 5, how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And we'll just start there. I mean, that's a powerful and true statement. Rarely do we see anybody fail that really buys into this program, that really works it to the best of their ability, is honest with themselves, open-minded, and willing to do whatever it takes. The people that come to meetings, they're of service, they get a sponsor, they work the steps, they change their daily habits, they're honest with themselves about their past and the things that they've been doing. They're practicing integrity in the way that they live today. And they're doing the next right thing day after day and taking it one day at a time. People that do that do not fail in this program. Like, rarely have we seen someone fail who has thoroughly followed our path. It's a proven program, right? Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. And that's the thing, is like honesty is number one. Like that's what gets us here in the first place, right? Like admitting that we have a problem and being willing to do something about it, but it starts with that honesty of admitting that we're powerless over drugs and alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. And then, being honest with other people and raising your hand and asking for help and taking an honest look at our past and taking an honest look at our motives and where we want to go in the future here. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. And that's true. Like, I've seen people in AA, other programs that suffer from mental disorders like schizophrenia or anxiety, bipolar, things like that. And if those people are willing to be honest and be honest about their mental health issues, outside issues, and do something about their addiction, and they thoroughly follow our path and work this program to the best of their ability, they're able to get and stay sober. Like they're able to work through the things that they've done and find meaning in their life and find meaning in sobriety and live a good life. And it does take outside help too. A lot of those people need medication, but that's okay as long as it's supervised by a doctor and they're following their suggestions and doing the things necessary to keep their life on track. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And that's that willingness, like being willing to do whatever it takes to get and stay sober. If you've decided you want what we have, If you decided that you want to be sober and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And you got to be willing to do whatever it takes to get and stay sober. And that's a tough pill to swallow, like any lengths, and it means first of all being honest with yourself about what got you here. Like what happened in the past that got you to this place of that hopeless demoralization, like what brought you to your bottom. And we get into that in this program. We'll start peeling back the layers of that onion to figure that out. But being willing to do whatever it takes to go to any lengths, and a lot of times that means making tough decisions with people, like being honest about our relationships and being willing to, cut certain people off, to change our environment. For me, like I could not get sober on my own. Like I had to be removed from society. And so if you're in that position of powerlessness, maybe rehab is the right decision for you. Because if you're really ready to be clean and sober, but you're powerless, you need help, right? And rehab is a great source of help to get you out of the certain circumstance that you're in, whether that's at home or wherever you're at, and remove you from society for a minute, get you into a safe place around people that care about your sobriety and well-being and are, able to help you with your physical needs as well as, some of your mental health needs as well. And that can be the separation that you need to get over that powerlessness. Because my powerlessness, I was not capable of getting sober on my own. If I was free, I was going to be drinking for sure, smoking weed all day. And that just led to other things, But if you're willing to do whatever it takes and you're willing to take certain steps, right? And the steps that we take are the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. And that was my dilemma in the beginning, was like, when I was a young man introduced to these rooms, and I wasn't entirely ready, like I balked at some of these steps. Like I was like, man, that's a lot, and I thought I could find an easier, softer way. I thought that I could not do the steps. I thought I could pick and choose some steps to do. I thought I could do it without a sponsor. I thought I could do it without being of service, without coming to meetings. Like I tried every way, I tried trading certain drugs for others. I traded heroin for alcohol. I traded marijuana for alcohol. Or traded alcohol for marijuana, and it never worked. It never worked until I was willing to completely surrender and buy into this program and really give my life to a higher power and cultivate that relationship and fill that hole, because for me, like that was it. Like I had a hole in my spirit, that I was like covering with drugs and alcohol, and really only God could fill that hole. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. And that's it. Like, you just got to buy in. You got to drink the Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? You got to let go of your old ideas. Like, your old ideas got you to this bottom, right? Like, my old thinking got me, like I said in the last episode, like just bleeding ulcers, sick, spiritually, mentally, physically, handcuffed and shackled to a table. Like that's where my ideas take me. I need to let go of all my old ideas, wipe the slate clean, sit down, shut up, open my ears, and listen to the suggestions of people that know how to get and stay sober, because I don't. Like I had to come to terms that I didn't know what I was doing. My best thinking got me to where I was, and I didn't want to be there anymore. So I was willing to do whatever it took to get and stay sober because something had to change. And if I wasn't willing to change, then things wouldn't change, right? Nothing changes if nothing changes. And so I need to be humble enough to understand that I don't know how to do this, and that I can't do this alone, and that I need a higher power to get me there, because no human force can get or keep me sober. I can't do it. My mom can't do it. My best friend can't do it. My psychologist can't do it. Nobody can do it but God. And with God's help and my perseverance and my dedication and my hard work, I can get and stay sober and live a life of meaning. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But the one who has all power, that one is God. May you find him now. That's it. You have to surrender, And that's the thing is, like, for me, that surrender, just that word, that word surrender bothered me as a child. Like, men that I looked up to didn't surrender. Like, there's no surrender, no retreat, right? I'm willing to die behind things, and I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to back down. I'm not fucking surrendering, dude. So that's what kept me sick for a long time, was like not being willing to surrender, like thinking that I could control it, that I was in control, that I could, if only certain things would happen, then I would be able to overcome this, if I got the right girl, if I got the right job, if I got out of my living situation into a different one, if I moved over here, if I got a truck, if whatever, then I'll be ready, and that never worked out for me. You know what I mean? Until I completely surrendered, because I have very limited power in my little finite brain, but there is one that has all power, that the creator of the universe, right? He has the power to overcome anything, to change anything, to build anything, create anything. And he can recreate me, right? If I allow him to. If you reach out to that higher power and ask him to come into your life with real earnestness and really seek him out and cultivate that relationship, and be honest with yourself and be honest with your higher power, and really try, like, you can overcome this thing. You're not doomed. We're proven. It's a proven concept. But half measures avail us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection with care and complete abandon. And that's it, dude. Like, half-assing it won't get you anywhere. Half measures avail us nothing. We have to be all in. That's it, dude. Like, just buy in. Buy in for 1 year. That's what I tell people. Just do it for 1 year, dude. Like, just completely surrender. Give your life over to God and buy into this program, and, read the literature, dive into this thing, become of service, help other people, get outside of yourself, heal from the traumas of the past, figure out what got you here in the first place, overcome those things, wipe the slate clean, and build a life of sobriety. And if you do that for 1 year, you will have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and your life will change, and you'll just want to give it to other people. But if you don't like where you're at in a year after, working an honest, thorough program, you can always go back. Like, the streets are not going anywhere. So, what's the risk? The risk versus reward is there, like, give this thing a shot. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. And we'll deep dive into every step later on, but we'll just go over them here. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. And that's it. It's all about progress. We're just trying to change our lives for the better. We're trying to get out of that pit of despair, trying to get out of that bottom, whatever got us here in the first place, and trying to progress. And it's not a straight uphill climb. It's up and down and sideways and sometimes backwards and then back up and then we stumble and then we'll go back up and then maybe we'll come back down and grab some other people and then come back up, and it's progress, not perfection, and we're sinners, dude. We're messed up individuals, we're flawed, and we grow up in a flawed environment, and we're brainwashed and just fed propaganda, and we're taught all types of weird stuff, and we're attracted to weird stuff, and we get jacked up out there, and it brings us to this point where something has to change, because when we're living in our own will, it ends with pain. We chase pleasure for so long, and that road has a painful ending every time. You can only live in your will for so long before things get very, very painful. And when we get there, we become willing to do whatever it takes, and we start to, take suggestions and move forward, and that's what it's about, is moving forward. And, that's why we always say, keep coming back, is even if you slip, you fall down 7 times, get up 8, and just continue to make progress. Doesn't matter how many times you relapse, just come back, you're lucky if you do, right? So you just got to humble yourself and be honest with yourself, and it's not an excuse to use and to slip and to relapse. Oh, I'm progressing, but really, really try, when you're really honest and willing and trying to do the next right thing, and have a sincere desire to heal and a sincere desire to progress, you will, as long as you're following some suggestions and are have an open mind to this, idea and concept of sobriety, your life will progress, and you will see the fruits of that. When you're cultivating a relationship with a higher power and are trying to live in God's will and are of service in these programs and are trying to live righteously and just trying to do the next right thing and have a sincere desire to do that, God knows your heart, right? And you will be rewarded for those actions and rewarded for those, thoughts and rewarded for helping other people, whether you believe in God or karma or whatever it is. That stuff is real, and what you put out comes back. And the more that you practice God's will and practice these principles in all your affairs, your life will get better, and you'll notice that, and you'll just want to continue to progress down that line. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. So that's step 1 and 2, right? That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. That probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, right? And that God could and would if he were sought. Being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our lives over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? So for me, this was like the turning point in my recovery journey. It was like, once I made that decision, that was it. I took this step very seriously. And like, for me, it was like, all right, this is the fork in the road, like once I make this decision, I'm not going back, and I had never really made that decision. I had probably danced around with the idea and like, half-assed it, right? Half measures, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But I had never clearly made that decision and then followed through with my decision. And that's the thing, is like, it's just a decision. It's not an action. We're not in the action step yet. Like, you can make a decision and not follow through with that decision, right? You can decide you're going to do something or go somewhere or be something, and you can have all the sincerity in the world, but until you put that into action, it's just a decision, right? And that's all we're doing here. But for me, it was the turning point, because I was willing to do whatever it took to get and stay sober. So when I made this decision, I knew that that was it. Like, I'm cutting off the old way of life, and I'm deciding to turn my will and my life over to God of my understanding to the best of my ability, and that meant I'm no longer living for Blaine's will. I'm no longer, gonna live in selfishness and self-centeredness. I'm no longer gonna pleasure seek, I'm gonna put God's will in everything I do to the best of my ability. Like, again, I know I say it a lot, but like, I'm still human. I'm still flawed. Like, I make mistakes, but I'm trying to progress in this walk, right? And for me, that meant, first and foremost, stop the bleeding. Like, stop being a piece of shit. Stop lying, cheating, manipulating. Stop trying to take advantage of people, and then start developing positive habits. Like, what is God's will for me? And for me, God's will meant living righteously, like just being a nice, regular person, upstanding member of society, trying to be of service wherever I can be. For me, a lot of it's in this program, but in society too. Like, if you see something that needs to be done, do it. Like, don't expect somebody else to do it. And a big one for me is like, people that are, getting car accidents on the side of the road. You see people just like driving by. For me, I always pull over and make sure they're okay. Like, if you see something, a spot that needs to be filled, fill the spot. If you can be of service anywhere, be of service there. Raise your hand and like try to do something with yourself. Don't expect other people just to take care of you and like take care of other people. Like, be the change. That was God's will for me in my journey, is like, be the change, be the light. And when I took this step, I got on my knees and I reached out to my higher power and I asked him to come into my life. And I made a covenant with him that if you help me to get sober and show me how to live this life clean and sober, then allow me to be a vessel of your truth. Allow me to be a vessel of your knowledge. Allow me to help other people. Help me help you. Help me help others. And, that's what we're doing here today. And, I'm of service in these programs and I walk the walk, And the more that I've done that, the better my life has gotten. The more I've been able to get out of my own will and try to align my will with God's will, the better my life has gotten. And like, the more I listen to the still small voice in the back of my head, the more I listen to that Holy Spirit's conviction in my life, and, you know, listen to that voice that's telling me I need to stop doing certain things or I need to be doing certain things, the more I'm obedient to that, the better my life gets. And for me, that's God's will in my life, to be a good man, to be a good father, to be a good member of society, to be a good member of these programs, to be the light, to be the change, right? To be the role model for other people like me to see, oh, you can come out of these situations in the street. You can come out of darkness and come to the light, get clean and sober, and live a life of meaning. And that's an incredible part. And it starts with this step here. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if the people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. And that's, that's our will. We're trying to force our will on other people, trying to force our will in environments. And like we think, we just try to control things, right? We try to control our lives, other people's lives to make our lives better. And it's all our will. Me, 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 me. If you would just do this, if she would stop doing that, if I could just have this. And we try to control and manipulate and scheme and scam and try to get ourselves in position. And we're only thinking about ourselves. And it never works out that way. What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction, happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, the producer of confusion rather than harmony? Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lulls the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are all sure would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. And the alcoholic who lost it all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-pity? Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. And it is, trying to put ourselves first in all these situations, it's the issue, and for me, I was always trying to change the way that I felt, like not only trying to, put myself first in all these situations to gain standing, status, money, power, respect, whatever it is, but I'm also like trying to change the way that I felt. So I'm also drinking every day and using other substances to get outside of myself. And that is another form of selfishness and self-centeredness. Like I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stay loaded, and I'm willing to commit crimes. I'm willing to sell stuff, rob stuff, whatever it takes, right? And It doesn't matter who I'm hurting. Doesn't matter if I'm hurting myself. Like the repercussions are meaningless. Like my body was just getting destroyed, you know? I was falling apart. My mental state had deteriorated. My spiritual state was very dim, you know, like I was a mess, dude. I had all of the repercussions in the world staring at me in the face. Couldn't stay out of jail, losing custody of my kid, like not being able to hold on to relationships, no money, flipping cars, DUIs, you know, poor relationships with women and friends, like burning bridges, losing jobs, just a mess, dude, just a mess. But all my selfish and self-seeking desires were just, how can I get out of this? You know, what do I need to do to get into a better housing situation? What do I need to do to, you know, feel better right now? Like, forget about the future, you know? Tomorrow is going to bring tomorrow, and tomorrow will worry about itself. But right now, I need to change the way that I feel. And that's a sketchy spot to be in. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later place us in a position to be hurt. Yeah, it's like we do it to ourselves, you know, even if we feel like somebody wronged us, like we always have a role to play in those situations. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. And that's it, you know, like take ownership. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big part of this program and a big part of life and growth and progress, right? Is like take ownership of all this stuff. Like take responsibility for your actions, you know, like be honest with yourself about where you're at, what you've done, the places that you've been, the things that have happened. Take ownership of that stuff. Stop fucking blaming other people. It's not your parents' fault. You are where you are. You can blame other people one time. You can blame your family situation once. That's it. You know, if you get to 18 years old and your mom and dad fucked you up, the government fucked you up, whatever situation you came through messed you up. You got raped, molested, you know, trafficked, whatever it is. You were homeless, you were abused. All those things are horrible, and all of those things, especially unprovoked, are not your fault. And that's the truth. But what's also the truth is that now that you're an adult, your response is your responsibility. You know, you're no longer powerless, right? You now are in position to change your life and to rewrite the outcome. Like all those issues happened, and they happened for a reason, and they brought you to the point where now you have a decision to make. And you know, a lot of us stay sick in the past for a long time, and we allow those situations to continue to hurt us and continue to, you know, mess up our future, and we use it as excuses for our behavior. But as adults, like we're no longer under, you know, those powers. Like we have decisions to make, and we have the power to change. And there's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of self-help groups, and you know, hopefully you find the help that you need. But it takes ownership. Like you have to take responsibility for your life now, and responsibility for your future. And you know, if you are a victim of assault and abuse and trafficking, you know, it never happened to me, and I'm not here to judge you and to judge your journey. But I know that you can overcome it. And I know that you can change the perspective on things that have happened to you, and you can change the outcome of your life. And you can find meaning in those things by helping other people to overcome those same situations. And that's what we do in these programs is like we become the light. We become the person that can show you what is possible, right? And it's not about what happens to us, it's about how we react and overcome the things that have happened to us. And that is where the power is. And you can find that power from God. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes this possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be the director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arc through which we passed through to freedom. When we sincerely took this position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer, being all-powerful. He provided what we needed. If we kept close to him and performed his work well, established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. Man, that's the beauty of it right there. Like, get out of your own way, right? Surrender your power to a higher power. Like, allow God to take the wheel. Like, as soon as I gave it all to him, like, I immediately got that peace. Is I no longer cared about the outcome. Like, I knew that when I tried to control things, it got me to that point. But when I gave up the power, when I gave it to God and asked him to take control of my life and to show me how to live, and then like paid attention to that and really tried to take those suggestions and really tried to do something about it and didn't care about the expectations, but only cared about trying to follow God's will, I gained that peace. I gained that power, right? I gained the power to overcome my mind, right? I was no longer anxious about the future, and I was in a bad spot. I had lost everything. I was looking at a bunch of time, lost my daughter. Like, I had a lot of negative stuff going on, but I no longer cared about the outcome because I only cared about healing and I only cared about living in God's will. And for me, I knew that I just needed to take it one day at a time and give the expectations to God. And I knew that as long as I did that, I was going to be taken care of. I knew that God had my best interest in mind. I knew that this program worked. I knew that God cared about me. I knew that I had a willing and loving God that would take care of me as long as I tried my best. And that's been my truth, and it's been other people's truth too. And the more that we try to do that and align our will with his, the better our life gets. And we enjoy that peace of mind. And we discover we could face life successfully. No matter what happens, like keeping that faith, and when we keep that faith and we overcome life successfully, when life shows up and we're able to stay sober and like work through things without drinking, we build that self-confidence, and when we overcome these hurdles in life without using, we build that confidence and realize we never have to use again. Like nothing can take me out anymore. Like it doesn't matter. I can overcome this. I can live with myself. I can live life on life's terms without drinking, because drinking never solves anything for me. As a matter of fact, it ruined everything for me. We were reborn. That's how I felt. I felt like I was born again, you know. I just wiped that slate clean and was like, whatever, you know. All that just happened. Like, I can't take back what just happened. I own up to the things that I did, right? We take ownership, and I'm moving forward. And it doesn't matter if everybody else feels that way or not. Like, I feel that way. I'm writing a clean slate for myself. Like, I don't care who's mad at me. You know, like, those are all their own personal feelings and things that they have to work through. I need to find forgiveness for myself so that I can live for today, because that's all we have, right? And I need to feel okay with myself today, because I'm the only one inside of this skull. You know, like, I have to be okay with myself. And the only way I'm okay with myself is when I'm okay with my creator. And when I'm okay with my creator is when I'm living life by his will to the best of my ability. And when I'm not, I own up to that stuff, and I'm, you know, change, and I move forward. We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. And that's the 3rd step prayer. And that's the, you know, I do that with all my sponsees. And, you know, it's important, you know, to really, to make that connection with your higher power, and to really, you know, make that prayer earnest, you know, like, really feel that, and like really ask him to come into your life, you know, to relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to you. Like, allow my victory over self to glorify you, Father. Like, allow me to bear witness to your power, to your will, to your way of life. You know, that victory over myself may glorify God, to show other people that through me giving my life to a higher power, I am able to overcome the bondage of self. I'm able to get out of my own way and allow a higher power to come into my life and to recreate my life. You know, I can't take away the sins of the past. That's on Jesus, right? But I can recreate my life today and rewrite the story. And that's what's important, you know, to realize that it's not me, and to glorify him, that I might better do thy will always, right? We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor, your sponsor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only the beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, in effect, sometimes a very great one was felt at once. And that's how it was for me. It was felt at once. Like, that was it. You know, I've turned my will and my life over to you, Father, and now I'm seeking that out. Like, now I've made the decision, and now I'm ready to get into action. Like, how do I live out your will? Okay. What are the morals and principles that I believe God stands for, and how do I live those out in my life? Right. And so I started looking at my life and my daily habits and the things that I was doing, the way that I was treating other people, the way that I was treating myself, because I'm God's child too. You know, like, I am his creation. And so I need to treat myself right. You know, it matters how you talk to yourself. Like, it sets up your perspective for how you deal with life in general. If you're talking down upon yourself, how are you going to have a good perspective and outlook on life? Like if you're constantly bashing and bad mouthing yourself, you're not going to have self-confidence. And if you don't have self-confidence, you're not going to be able to overcome the things that life has to throw at you. So it starts with that self-actualization and the way that you talk to yourself and realizing that I am a child of God and that I am worth it and that I do have meaning and I do have purpose, and that I am willing and capable of doing something worthy in my life and in society. I have something to offer. My life is worth it. And sometimes we need to look in the mirror and say these things, and like reinforce these ideas in our mind daily. And it matters about what you're putting in, like what are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Especially early in sobriety. Like I had to change everything. I had to completely swing the pendulum. And it started with this step, like thinking about what God's will was in my life and then looking that way and like making those changes. I didn't want to read any type of violence. I didn't want to hear any type of gangster rap or anything about drugs or women, like any of that stuff. I was solely focused on God and I was solely focused on recovery because that's what I needed. I needed to be obsessed with this thing. I needed to be addicted to recovery, right? Recovery addicts, like full blast, tunnel visioned, because that's what I need right now. I had spent so long just like lost in the flesh, lost in my own desire, that selfishness, self-centeredness, that I had lost myself in the darkness. And so I needed to turn the lights on and only focus on positivity in my life. And eventually you find balance, right? And that's where I'm best, is having balance. Obviously, not focusing on darkness. I'm not talking about like having light and dark, but having balance in all areas of my life. I'm no longer affected by those negative things because I've been changed. Like God has come into my life and changed my heart. I no longer have the desires of the flesh that I used to have. I no longer lust for women the way I used to. I no longer lust for power or money or any of those things the way that I used to. I'm not saying I don't at all, but not the way that I used to. My heart has been changed. I no longer, am pounding my head full of negativity and like seeking that out. I used to like harness that darkness, and use it against other people and use it against myself. Like that's how lost I was. And today my heart has been changed and redeemed, and I no longer have those feelings. Now I seek positivity. Now I seek redemption. Now I seek progress. Now I seek love. Now I seek to be of service. And all of those attributes came through seeking God in my life. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. And this is getting into the fourth step. And that was it, dude. Like, the liquor was a symptom. Like, it was the answer to the way that I felt. Like, my alcoholism was a symptom of my spiritual, like, unwell-being, right? My spiritual sickness, my mental illness, my physical problems, my mental problems, like, came out as alcoholism and drug use. But really, there was things underlying that were causing that. And that's what we're trying to get to in this fourth step. Like, you take the drugs and alcohol away from me and I still have issues, right? Like, the drugs and alcohol are not the main problem. Like, I'm the real alcoholic. So some people, you take the drugs and alcohol away and they're okay, right? The alcohol is the problem. If they could stay off the alcohol, they can keep their life together. For me, you take the alcohol away and I'm a freaking raw wound, and I need that alcohol to numb the pain. right? That's a symptom of the way that I'm living. Take that stuff away and I still have all these issues, right? And that's where we get into the work of this 4-step, is uncovering these issues, looking at the root cause of them, taking ownership and working through it and letting it go. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock and trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsellable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. He did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure, being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. We considered it common manifestations. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. We were burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations, which had been interfered with? We were usually as definite as this example. And it lists, how to do your 4-step on paper here. And basically it's, who am I resentful at? What was the cause of that resentment? What happened? How did it affect me? And I like to put, what was my role in it? So I add an extra column there. And here's an example. And I like to make one more column, saying what was my role in it? Because that was it for me, was like looking at all of these situations and like realizing that I had a role to play in all of these relationships, and the big light bulb for me was looking at the relationship with my daughter's mom. And like, dude, the things that transpired in that relationship were very painful. And, she did things to me at the end that were, horrible and that really spun me off into the deep end. And I had a lot of hatred for her and a lot of hatred for women in general. And I was angry, and I was upset. And it wasn't until working this 4-step that I was able to take a step back and detach from the situation and like look at these relationships, and specifically the one with her, and realize that it was me. Like, I was the one that pushed her away in the beginning. She was there for me. Like, she, had my baby and was like willing to try and make this thing work. And I was the one that was an alcoholic drug addict. Like, I was lying to her. I wasn't being honest. I wasn't living up to her expectations as a spouse, as a father, a provider, all these things. I was self-seeking and selfish in my desires. I wasn't putting our relationship first. I was lying to her, using on the side, lying to her about it, spending a lot of money on drugs and alcohol, and had pushed her away. I was the root cause of all of these things, and until I realized that, I stayed sick. And once that light bulb came on, it was like, wow, and it made it a lot easier for me to forgive her for the things that she did, by taking ownership of these situations. I'm able to, find forgiveness for other people because it's my fault. And if I can forgive myself, then it's all good, and that's where I'm trying to get, is like, find forgiveness for other people, find forgiveness for myself, wipe the slate clean and move forward. But you got to be honest. Like if you don't work an honest 4-step and like really get all these things on paper and are honest about your role in all these situations, it's not going to work for you, you know? And if you're not willing to look at all of these situations honestly, the chances are they're going to come back, you know? And until you work that honest 4-step and really work through those situations, get those things on paper and deal with them internally, the chances of them coming back are very strong. And when they come back, it can be a real problem, you know, and it can cause you to go back out. And, you know, a lot of people go back out over this step because it's hard, dude. It's hard to look at these resentments. Like it brings up all those emotions. You know, you look at these situations, these relationships, and it brings back all that anger, right? It brings back the jealousy. It brings back the pain, you know, of all these situations. And then being honest and like taking ownership of the fact that I'm the jackass here, you know, and like dealing with that. And then you got to deal with the shame and guilt of all those situations without drinking or using, you know, and that's why it's so vitally important to be doing this step with a sponsor and to be, you know, fully engaged in this program and going to meetings and talking about the way that you feel with other people that have been there, that have experienced these things, that are like-minded, that care about you. And, you know, to have outlets for these emotions. For me, it's exercise and writing. Like for other people, it's whatever works for you, but you need to have an outlet. You got to have an outlet. We can no longer push these feelings and emotions down inside without dealing with them. Like that's what got us to that point in the first place. You know, if you stuff these emotions, for me, it comes out in explosions, you know, and then I burn my freaking life to the ground, and I'm not willing to do that anymore. What I am willing to do is whatever it takes, right? And for me, that means being willing to be uncomfortable, you know, and that uncomfortability looks like talking to another man about my problems. Because that was never an experience I had. Like I was always trying to be the tough guy, like was never wanted to show any emotion, you know, you're never going to catch me crying. Like, so to raise my hand and talk to another man about the way that I'm feeling, it's tough. It's tough, you know, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes because I'm not willing to go back to that old way of life, you know, so I got to get outside of myself and you know, put my feelings on the shelf and be willing to do whatever it takes to get and stay clean and sober. And that's it. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. And that's like that saying, you know, resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. Like harboring that anger, it doesn't do anything because that person probably doesn't give a shit, you know? Like they probably don't feel the same way you feel. So all you're doing is like harboring these negative images and these negative feelings towards that person when they don't even give a crap about you, dude. Or they've already forgiven you and like move forward. It's not even a big deal. Like they love you. It's not even an issue, but you're harboring these resentments and all it's doing is making you sick. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, those hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. This business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. And that's how real it is, dude. Like, harboring these resentments can be fatal. Like not taking an honest and thorough 4-step can be a fatal mistake, because if you leave these stones uncovered and you don't come to the point of forgiveness for that person and forgiveness for yourself, it can cause you to go back out. And to go back out is jeopardizing your life because this disease is fatal. It gets worse, never better. Jails, institutions, and death. That's it, right? So that's how real it is to take these steps with all the best of your ability, honest and thorough from the very start. If we were to live We had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be dubious luxuries of normal men, but for the alcoholics, these things were poison. We turned back to the list, for it held the key to our future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments had to be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away with any more alcohol. This was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way that they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We asked God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Then when a person offended, we said to ourselves, that is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And that, dude, is like the key to the door of forgiveness. Like looking at these resentments and like realizing we all go through things, like some of us are alcoholics and addicts. Others of us go through trauma and whatever, all the negative things that we see people get raised in and go through happen. And, ours manifests in addictions. And we're lucky to have these programs and like get funneled into these environments where healing is like forced or like we're shown how to overcome it. A lot of people are just out there raw dogging their trauma, and like raw dogging their mental illness and like not taking prescriptions and just like going through life. And that manifests in violence and it manifests in all types of negative things, And so coming to the understanding that a lot of people are sick too, and they harm us because of those things, because of things that they've been through, because of the lies that they've been told, because of the pain that they're going through. They project that onto other people and they hurt us. Hurt people, right? There's that saying. But broken people help broken people, and that's the truth too. And that's the power of this program, and we have to understand that everybody has issues, everybody goes through things and, we hurt each other when we're hurt, and we have to give people that grace. And it was easier for me to forgive other people when I realized that I'm fucked up, and if I'm capable of doing these things, like, of course, other people are capable of doing these things too, whether it's behind drugs and alcohol or not. Like, we all have issues, and we're all capable of violence. We're all capable of harming each other in one way or another, whether that's manipulation or, financial, sexual, whatever it is. Like, we can all hurt each other, whether we mean to or not. And understanding that I was physically, mentally, and spiritually sick, and that's why I caused a lot of these pains on other people, allowed me to give grace to other people to have that as well, and then praying for those people, like really sincerely praying for those people, whether you want to or not, like whether you're really over those resentments or not, you can pray your way out of those resentments sometimes and like really pray for those people earnestly and hope that they find that healing that they need, hoping, that they find God in their life and that they find the higher power in their life to overcome the situations that, caused them to harm you and to harm other people. And, you can pray your way into good feelings about people. It's true. It happens. And that's one of the tools that we use in this program. If we're having a hard time, like overcoming these resentments, we tell each other, like, pray for that person, really pray for them earnestly that they find the healing that they need and that they come to terms with the things that they've done. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take kind and tolerant views of each other and everyone. Referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrong others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation may not have been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person who was involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. We noticed that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties of Mr. Brown, Mr. Joynes, and he's talking about the list that he made there. But that's it, dude. Like taking that ownership. Like what role did we have to play in this thing? That's the most crucial part. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. Even though we had no resentment in connection with them, we asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because of self-reliance had failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. Perhaps it made us cocky. It was worse. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so. We are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him. Does He enable us to match calamity with serenity? Does He enable? And that's it, We put our trust in God rather than ourselves. And we're in the world to play the role that He assigns, right? Like that's living in His will, getting outside of ourselves and like not putting ourselves first anymore, but seeking God's will in all things, And when we can do that, like we're on the right path. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it's the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. When you're living in faith, fear has no place there because we no longer fear the outcomes. We no longer fear or have expectations. Like we're just living in God's will. Like having that faith and having that peace and serenity overcomes that fear of the future. Like I don't even care what happens. Like I know that whatever happens is supposed to happen and I'm going to handle it the best way I know how. And the best way I know how is through having that faith in God. And when I have that faith, it allows me to have peace of mind through calamity. Life is going to continue to show up, and it's about how we deal with it, right? And that's why we say that serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like I need to do what I can do to put myself in the best position to win, and I give the rest to God. I work hard and I trust God, and that's it. And when I do that, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Like fear is a poison in itself. It never serves us. The only time it serves us is if we're in a physical situation and we need to get out of it. If the fear is in your mind, then that is the problem. The future tripping and like the fear of the unknown, like that's where the pain is at. That's where that anxiety comes from, is when you're not living in the moment. And that fear is what keeps us out of living in the moment. And when you have true faith in your Creator and you're doing the things necessary in your life, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Now about sex. Many of us need an overhauling there, but above else, we try to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to the extremes, absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is the lust of our lower nature, a base of necessity of procreation. So, when it comes to sex, it's just like you need to take an honest look at how you're living. Like, are you using sex for the wrong reasons? Are you manipulating people for sex? Are you trying to change the way that you feel because of sex, like using sex to change the way that you feel, or pornography, masturbation? Like, are you just self-seeking, selfish in your desires? Is it a problem in your life? Like, are your sexual desires a problem in your life? And you need to be honest with yourself about that. Like, am I hurting other people by my sexual practices? Especially like if you have sexual desires for underage people, or like you have sexual desires to hurt women or children, just kill yourself. Just do us all a favor and just kill yourself. But if you're a normal man or woman and like you have the desires for appropriate age counterparts, you need to be honest about, are my sexual desires selfish, right? Am I lying to this person to get them into bed? Am I using their feelings for my selfish desires? Like, am I manipulating them for my sexual, desires? Or am I, trying to build a real relationship with this person, right? And like you got to put God's will into it, like what is God's will in my sex life? It's probably to get married and to like have a family, right? Isn't that the most logical reason? And I understand like in today's day and age, sex is a huge role in our environment and it's part of the dating process, but it doesn't have to be either, if you there's a reason why religions push marriage before sex. It's so you can really know the person before you have sex with them. And like that way sex is not the main reason why you're together. Because if it's the main reason that keeps you together, you're not going to last, because our bodies deteriorate and things happen and you won't be, and it's so fleeting. Like, if the sexual desire and like your sex life is what's keeping you together, you're not going to stay together because it's never enough. It's like money, dude. It's like, it's just never enough. You always want more. You always want something different. And that's just the way we're wired. We're wired to procreate and to like spread our seed, right? Especially as men. So for us, it's like, we cannot put sex first. Like, we need to be able to have a real relationship with this person and really care about their feelings and like be willing to work together as a team for common goals and like really want to raise a family together. Or if you don't want kids, just have common goals and common vision and direction in your life and where you want to go. And just make sure you're not putting sex first. If we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. And that's it, trying to come to terms with our past, digesting some big chunks of truth about ourselves, and then find forgiveness. For me, and I think for most people in this program, like finding forgiveness for yourself is the hardest part. and it took me a long time to get to that place, especially like looking through all these resentments and like coming to terms and coming to the understanding that I was the problem. Well, geez, man, now what? Now what am I supposed to do? Like, I am the problem, right? Like, what? I had to come to terms with that. I was the issue, and I'm the only person that could get me out of it, right? And I had to find forgiveness for myself, and that was it. And for me, having some grace and understanding that I was sick, that the things that I was doing, I wouldn't do sober. And I've proven that to myself. I've been sober for 6 years now, and I don't do those things anymore. I'm not out there living the same way. I've been remade through my relationship with my higher power. And those things that I was doing out there, the lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, hurting other people, all the selfish, self-centered desires, I was doing that because I was sick, and giving myself that grace of the knowledge that I was sick gave me some room, and I can't take back the things that I've done. Like what's happened has happened. I've hurt a lot of people. I've burned a lot of bridges. I've made amends where I can make them, but there's some amends I can never make because I've hurt random people, and to make amends would injure them or others in some instances too. And so the only way that I can come to terms with the things that I've done in the past is by living in amends today. And so today I try to live in God's will. I try to, walk righteously. And when I'm wrong, I promptly admit it and I change, and as long as I'm living in amends to my past, then I can be okay with myself today. Whereas if you continue to live the way that you were living, then nothing changes, right? And you're still going to be stuck in that guilt and shame and regret and resentment for yourself, and that's the biggest resentment is for self in a lot of our lives. And I know for me, it was like not living up to my own expectations as a father, as a man, as a son, as a friend, as a spouse, all these things, kept me sick, and I was angry at myself for those, so I just needed to wipe the slate clean, and live in amends to the past and live righteously today to the best of my ability. And it's progress, not perfection. And, as long as I try to align my will with God's will and continue to seek that out in my life and continue to cultivate this relationship with my higher power, stay connected to these programs, be of service, be a good man, be a good father, and a good friend, good spouse, brother, son, all those things, then I can be okay with myself today. And I put faith in my higher power for the future and for how I'm living right now. And I know that no matter what happens, that I'm going to be okay because I have that foundation of faith and I live in his will today. So hopefully you guys got something out of that, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.
Victorious we became, but never forgot where we came from. Life or death, not a game. We came to change the lane. Recovery addicts, that's the name. Give yourself a break, just one day at a time. You were born to shine, so live and let love be forever. My sister, my brother, don't give in. Please remember, the lie is dead. We do recover. Welcome home.